Let's start with the basics of CSS. Let's create a new file called index.html. Let's put some dummy HTML here. Let's start go live server. We have the live server now. There is nothing here, but we will add something. So default HTML styles. So any HTML document will have HTML, head, body. These three elements are the structure of HTML document. In this, we will have header element. Header is usually used for top navigation elements. Let's say I will add h1 here, heading. Likewise, we will have h2, h2. Okay, these are actually basic HTML elements. There are some set of predefined styles for these elements. Let's see what those styles are. In the section tag, we will have some dummy text. I've added just dummy text. If you type in, let's say, lorem, in VS Code, there is a shortcut. If you type lorem and press tab, it will autofill some data for you, some dummy text. So it's kind of a paragraph. We'll add another paragraph. And we also have list items. Unordered list and ordered list are two types of list items. We will visit that in some time. This is unordered list. Something like that. And there is something called ordered list, which is a bullet points. If you see all this in the browser, it will be evident. Build this one and then we'll visit the browser. Now let's go to the browser. And if you see here, these are the headings, these are the paragraphs, and this is the unordered list, and this is the ordered list. The difference between ordered and unordered is unordered will have bullet points as dots, and this will have numbered lists. These styles also we can change with CSS. Let's inspect this and see what's the default CSS rules for these styling elements, styling properties for these elements. Let's click on this. Let's go to heading. So if you see here, by default, user agent styles is nothing but the browser's default styling for these elements. We can customize these stylings based on our set of rules. So these are the default applied stylings. If you see here, EM is the default measurement for the element measurement. So one EM is the font style. EM is actually equal to the font size of the browser of this particular element. If you see the paragraphs, this is a block element. You see here, heading is a block element. That means it will come in a separate line. You see paragraph. This is also block element. Display property is block. For unordered lists, list item has display as list item. List style is disk. Disk actually means there is a circle here. This dot. List style, if we change, if you type down here, we can actually see different types of list styles. If you select square, it will be square. If you select circle, it will be an unfilled circle. If you zoom in, you can see the difference. So default list style is the disk style. We are actually overriding this style with circle. And if you go to this ordered list item, this style type is decimal. We can actually change that. All the other items, we can actually use any other property like this. So these are the default styles for the browser elements. We can customize these defaults with our own set of rules. We'll now see a simple division with a background. We'll first see the background styling. So we can actually refer to MDM, CSS reference. All the CSS properties, what elements will support what CSS properties, everything will be listed here. Anchor elements is nothing but the links. So we can actually see all the properties, width, height, all this. You can refer to this. Now let's see the background property. Create a division. I think I'll create it in the top row. I create a division element with a class name as background. So first thing we need to learn here is the class. So items can have IDs and classes. Let's say I have another item. I can have ID as my division. And whatever we put here can be selected with the ID. So there are ID selectors and class selectors and element selectors in CSS. Let's see how to use those styles. In here, let's create a new styles.css file and include this file as a styling element. Link relation as style sheet. Strength. Source. This dot slash style.css. And let's select the item with ID as my division. So the ID selector actually starts with pound symbol like this, and whatever properties we keep here will be applied to this division element. Say I will say width as 100 pixels and height as 100 pixels. Background color is say blue. Now let's see the browser. So this division, if you install, my division is having custom styles that are from styles.css. width as 100 pixels, height as 100 pixels, background color as blue. So apart from background color, we can actually have background image, background image. The background image can be specified with URL something. So let's search for an image. Let's try background. Let's use this background style. Copy image chess. Here I'm going to use this URL. And let's see what this shows. This is the background image. To see inspectors and see here, this will draw the full background image, but size of the division element is not as big as this, which is by 36 pixels by 360 pixels. That's why only a portion of this background is being shown in this division. How to fit this and all, we will see next. We can actually use background position as our cover. And it's not background position. We'll visit that later. Let's say if the division is bigger than the item, we can actually choose background repeat. If the size of the image is small, let's choose a smaller image. Let's find out. Let's use this image instead of. Can comment out rules with this syntax /star and then at the end /. Let's see. Okay, this is also big. We can do something. Fine. So just for demonstration, we'll just use background repeat. Background repeat, we can actually use no repeat. If you want to, if the image is small and the division is big, it will repeat itself. The background image will tile one after the other. The same image will repeat. Let's try 1024 by 768. Now the size of the division will be bigger. And if I select no repeat, it doesn't repeat itself. I don't select this, the background image will repeat based on width and height of the element. If you see here, so the tile has been placed. So it has been styled. So that is the use of background repeat. If I select no repeat, it will only put in the beginning of the division. And we have background position again. Background position is another property. And we can select the offset from the top, X direction and Y direction. So X axis starts from here to the right, Y axis starts from here to the bottom. So X and Y position, we can actually select background position 10 pixels. It is 10 pixels, one property if we are giving, that means from X direction 10 pixels, from Y direction 10 pixels. Okay, if I'm not giving the Y property, it's going to center align this element. If I give and there are 10 pixels here. X and Y both are 10. So if I eliminate one, it will only specify X direction and Y direction will be automatic. So similarly, if I do auto, this is nothing but giving auto in the second part. If I give auto here, it will autofill. If I don't give it, it will center align. There is something called background size, which we can control how much size the image should be. And we can actually say 10%. Let's see how this looks. And only the 10% of this size of the division element, it will occupy. If I give 100%, it will occupy the entire space. So that's about background. And now let's see, there is something called float, which is old style of aligning items. Let's use that. So instead of ID, I'm going to use background here. I'll use this element, remove this. The same styles get applied to the second element, background. Instead of pound symbol, I should use now dot. For class selectors, we should use dot. Now the same set of properties apply to the second element. Now let's visit float property. Let's have another container. This time I'm going to give a container class here for this. Here I'm going to use an image. Some image I will give. So basically, image is a self-closing element. We can actually close without having any closing image tag. We can actually close this. So the best way to use image is to actually close this with a self-closing slash at the end. It's always it's best practice to use a slash at the end for self-closing elements. So there are self-closing elements such as line break and horizontal ruler. So we'll discuss that when we are discussing the HTML elements. So I'll create another paragraph, button from something, another paragraph. Let's see how this looks in the browser. So this is how it is looking, and this, I think I can change the image size. So we can actually give the size here in the image itself. Say I'll give 100 pixels, width as 100 pixels, height is 100. Yeah. And wave size, height and 50. So the significance of float, we will discuss now. Container. Last name, I'm giving it as containers. So now I'm going to, so if you see, yes, the image tag has been, even though the size of it is only 100 pixels by 50 pixels, it's occupying the entire space from left to the right. If I hover over this, The size is only 100 pixels by 50 pixels, and the paragraph is a block element. That's why it is occupying the next line instead of coming in the same line. If I make this image as a float, it will not occupy. So this line will come over here, and behind that, it will display. Let's see. Let's change the image tags to. So now I'll use a selector. So this image tag is an element which has a class as container, right? So let's use the class selector dot container, and then any element that is within this container which has tag as image should have these properties. This is what this uh, rule specifies. So if I give a space between the element and the next element, that means the second element is a child of the first element. So it is this is called the parent container, and the image is a child of this. So it can be anything, any nested items. So within this hierarchy, any element that is a child of container will have this rule applied. So this image element, I'm going to use float property. Float left. Float left means float to the left. So if I change the float, it will use left. It doesn't occupy the entire space that is remaining. If there was an element, let's say I want to use this, instead of E, I have some element. Let's say I will use a span element. Hello world. This is not a block element. Let's see how this looks. So hello world got displayed just beside the image because this is a inline element. If you go click on this and see the styling. So if you go to computed, so the display style is inline. Inline elements all display one after the other, whereas block elements will occupy the entire space around them. If you see display here, this is a block element. Paragraph element is a block element, which means it will occupy the entire space in the line, in that particular line where it is placed. So the way to make sure the paragraph comes beside this is one way is to make the image as float, and there are better ways to do that with flexbox and grid containers that we will see in some time. So this was an old approach. So just to know that there is multiple ways, we are using float to demonstrate float. Let's remove this and now apply the float property to the image. That means it won't occupy the space entirely. So it will move it to the front of the display, and this image will be floated to the left. Similarly, if I use float as right, I'll just comment out and add float as right. What this does is it will float the image to the right. So all the text will occupy the space around it, and this will stay in the right side. And that's about float. Let's try something like background and border. Now I'm going to choose container. So I'll specify the width as 600 pixels. This is entirely within this 600 pixels range. I select margin. So actually, this is horizontal margin, left side margin, and this is top side margin. Margin auto means it's actually going to align it vertically to the center. You see here, this entire division is now aligned. If you expand this, margin top is 0 and bottom is 0, and right is auto, left is auto. That means it's aligned to the center of the element. We can actually expand this to 0, 0, 0, 0. This is top, right, bottom, left. Let's say this will be 10 pixels. The bottom is 0. This is 10 pixels or left, 20 pixels. Top, right, bottom, left. So if you expand this, if top is 0, right is 10 pixels, margin, bottom is 0 pixels, left is 20 pixels. Instead of specifying as a shortcut, we can actually explicitly specify these properties. Margin top, 0 pixels, margin bottom, 0 pixels, margin left. Auto means it will center the element from the left. Let's see how this looks. From the left, it will give the entire space, leaving the remaining space to the entire length of the item. And if I specify margin right also as auto, it will center the element. So note that the vertical alignment cannot work with the auto. So we can only specify left and right auto, which will center the element if I specify auto as the margin. So the shortcut for this is margin 0 pixels vertically and auto horizontally. This means top and bottom we have 0 pixel margin, and left and right we have automatic, which will center the element horizontally. And there is something called padding. This I will explain in a bit what padding box model is. If you inspect this, let's go through the layout of computer. Yeah. This is the CSS box model. So basically any element will have a margin and a border and then padding and then actual content. This content is the actual space occupied by the content itself. So around this, there will be padding. Currently, it is 0 padding. And around that, there will be a border. And any element is, we can think of that as a square, a rectangle, a box. This is the CSS box model. So topmost one is the margin. That is what we have specified in the margin. So we have specified left and right as auto, that is automatically deciding based on the window size and the browser display size. And then top and bottom, we have specified 0 padding, 0 margin. That's why it's showing minus hyphen. So inside that, there will be border. Inside that, there will be padding. So we will demonstrate what the padding is. Before that, I'll specify a border so that we will know what padding and what margin is. Let's go to the container. Let's add border here. border. So this is a shortcut. So I'm going to give a border of 5 pixels width and style as solid and color as black. So this creates a border of 5 pixels. If you inspect this, so if you expand this path, so this is a more detailed way of specifying the border properties. So this border is a shortcut for specifying all these properties. We can explicitly specify, just like we specified margin left, margin right, margin bottom. We can also specify border left, border right, all this. And this is a shortcut for that. First element will specify the width of the border and the style of the border, second element, and the color of the border as the third element here. Third property. So I'm putting a 5 pixel border of solid black color. So if you see computed section here, this is the actual content. Around that, there is no padding, which is 0 pixels. So that's why it's not showing. And there is a border of 4.8 pixels. But we actually have 5 pixels width, and this is calculating the line width also. That's why it is approximating it to 4.8. So this is the border. So these all explicit properties we can mention if you want to customize the style of the border. And let's add padding now. So inside this, I'm going to add padding. Similarly, padding can be specified 10 pixels. So 10 pixel padding means all directions 10 pixels. Let's now see how this looks. So padding is now 10 pixels. If you see the coloring around this, this is the padding. So all directions 10 pixels, it's giving a gap. Earlier there was no padding and this space was occupying even more space. Let's remove the padding. If you see, the padding is 0 now. Let's go to the styles and display plot. Let's just change one simple property. Box sizing as border box. I will explain what is border box. If you see here, the size of this has been reduced 590 to 156. If I disable this, just 600 by 156. Let's change it to content box. Box sizing as content box. By default, all block elements will have content box as the box sizing model. So browser displays all elements with a content box styling, which means the entire element size increases if we have added the border or margin. So around the margin, it will increase. Basically, let's disable this and let's change this back to border box. If you see here, this is 60.267. If I disable, it is now 55.467. The margin does not come under the size of the element. So basically, the size of the element is including the width and height of the content and the border. If I change to border box, basically the size of the element overall will include border as well as the element text itself. Let's say if this width is 100 pixels and border is 5 pixels, 95 pixels will be the content and 5 pixels will be the border. If I choose border box, if I don't choose border box, this overall size of the content plus border, it will increase. The overall size of it, if I have 5 pixel border and 100 pixel uh, content, it will be overall width of the box will be 100 plus 5, 105 pixels. So the difference is if we want to use same amount of space, whether we have added border or not, we have to use border box. So if we don't use border box, by default, browser will use content box as the sizing model and increase the size of the element when you add the border to it. So if you use border box, no matter what the border you add, it will only occupy 100 pixels, means overall size of the element will be 100 pixels, how much ever border you add. If I choose border box now, and if you see here, 590 plus border is 4.8, I'm just going to increase this to 15 pixels. And then from here, 590, now it has become 570. So border also is part of this overall size of it. If I don't use border box, if I use content box, size of the element will increase overall. The content size, let's disable this and see. So the size of the content still remains 600 by 156 and border got added extra. So the overall the element will occupy more space than its size if we add border when we don't have the border box selected as a sizing model. So two sizing models in the browser. One is content box, one is border box. Content box is the default model. So as we add border to the elements, the size of the element will overall increase and it will occupy more space in the browser, in the page, than its original size. So if we use border box, the overall size of the element stays as it is. And if we add border, increase the border size, it will just reduce the space occupied by the content and giving that space to the border. So that's the difference between border box and content box. So let's disable border box for now and reload. So we now have border as 5 pixels, solid black. There is something called font family. Any content, this content by default, if we see the browser's default content styling, the fonts and all will come from the browser. So family name times environment. This is the browser default uh, font styling. So if we go to fonts, we have so many different options we can use as fonts, different type of fonts we can use. The styling can be changed for the content with a property called fonts, font family. That font family, I'm going to use Arial, different fonts. And if you see the difference, I'll just choose this. If I don't choose this, the browser default fonts will come. If I change font family as to Arial, Helvetica, Sans Serif, these are three alternative font families. So basically, if Arial is not available in the browser, it will use Helvetica as the font. Otherwise, any generic sans serif, serif, monospace. There are generic fonts called sans serif and serif. Generic font families. using here, serif, sans serif, monospace, cursive. These are the generic fonts that are available in the browser. Any operating system will have its own generic fonts. If the custom fonts that we selected are not available in the browser, it will use the last generic font. So the styling of the fonts can be changed with font family. So that's about the basics of fonts, border, and background. Let's look into now positioning of the elements is an advanced concept. We will visit that in a later lesson. Now let's see the inline elements versus block elements. Now we have seen this floats and this is a block element, right? Let's see the difference between an inline element and a block element. Let's add something here. I'll have a paragraph. I will add class as first block. I'll add another paragraph. This is second block. I'll add a span element inline and then one more inline. So if you see here, this is a block element, this is a block one I add. Block. So these are block elements and these are inline elements. Basically, span is an inline element, paragraph is a block element. As we discussed earlier, block elements will occupy the entire width of the page, whereas inline elements display side by side. If you have two inline elements side by one after the other, it will display side by side. Whereas paragraph elements, which is block elements, will display one after the other in separate form. So we can actually change these properties with CSS, override these properties. These are the default styles for these block elements and inline elements. With the display property, we can actually change that behavior. Let's go add styling for these. Let's use paragraph. Let's to actually show the difference. So we can select paragraph elements, P elements. So if you are, this is CSS selector for generically selecting any P paragraph elements. So for selecting an element which has class, we will use dot notation here. For selecting elements with ID, we will use my element. This way we can use IDs instead of classes for selecting elements based on IDs. If you want to generally select based on the element type, element tag, we can directly use the tag name itself here. So all the elements, paragraph elements will apply, will get these properties in the CSS. Background, I'm going to use light green. Let's see this. All paragraphs in this page are light green background. These two got light background. Now all span elements, I want to apply background yellow. We can actually explicitly specify background color also. It's not necessary. Background, if we use. This is a generic way. If you inspect this, if you expand this background, you can see all the explicit properties that were generated. It has changed only the color property. All these other properties you can override it. So now we have inline elements and block elements. Now let's change the background, the margin of these elements. Let's see what's the behavior of these elements if I change the margin. First block, but this element, I'll change the margin to first block. This is class selector. I'm going to change margin bottom 0. Basically, it doesn't have any margin now. But still, this is occupying some space. I'll just comment out this and show you the difference. If we highlight this, so if you see the default stylings of this element, computed, so there is a margin of 16 pixels. If we highlight over here, we can see this. If you highlight on this element, you can see there is top and bottom margin. And if you see the second element, there is top and bottom margin. And this element's bottom margin and this element's top margin both are colliding. That is the default behavior of the browser. And we can change the bottom margin of this element with this. Now, as the bottom margin has been removed, these two elements should have been collided, but they did not, because this guy is second block is still occupying this space. If you see this, even when we selected margin as 0, I think it's not selected this element. First block. That's the reason. The quotations are not correct. We go back. Now if we inspect this element, the margin bottom is not highlighted. If you select this, only the top margin is getting shown. And if you select the second element, it has both top and bottom margins, which is 1 EM. We will discuss about EMs and REMs in a later lesson. For now, these are the default measurements for the top and bottom margins. So for the second element, I'm going to remove the top margin so that these things don't have any gap in between. Second block, margin top, I'm going to use 0. Now if you see, the top margin has been removed for the second element, and the bottom margin still remains. And now, so these are block elements. We can actually change these block elements to display like side by side. If you change the display property of these elements, P elements, let's go to P elements and enter. If we specify display as inline, they will show line within the same line, one after the other. Similarly, these inline elements can also be changed, the behavior of them. Display as block, if I specify, they will act like block elements. They will occupy the entire space width of the browser. So this is how we change the block element behavior and inline element behavior with the display property. And we have advanced capabilities like grid and flexbox, which we will discuss in a later lesson. And now, what about text? So within the division elements, we can actually change the behavior of text. Let's use that, see that behavior now. Let's create a section. So this is useful for editing content and something like a newsletter kind of approach. This is inline element. How do we change the alignment of text? These all things will be useful in editing content. Further, we have a section which has paragraph. Let's remove this background, or can keep the background. No problem. So this time we are going to manipulate text behavior. So for header element, I want to center align this header element. Main heading, I want to make it at the center. Let's choose H1, which is here. And this time I'm going to align text. Align center. This will align the text to the center. So what about the spacing between these? We can manipulate with letter spacing. Let's say I'll give 2 pixels, that will be too wide. So for each letter, there will be 2 pixels of gap in between. That is still okay. And for this inline element, I'll change the background to yellow, which I think we already have here. And these paragraphs, I will change the font size and line height. Line height actually specifies the height of each line. The gap between these two lines, we can increase. If I go to the paragraph element, I can actually change the behavior, font size. I'll change it to 20 pixels, which will be by default, the font size will be 16 pixels. Now the size has been increased to 20 pixels. Now I want to change line height, the gap between the two lines as 16 pixels. This will reduce the gap. Usually there will be a gap of 1 EM, which is 16 pixels in between these. I've reduced the line height to 16 pixels, that's why it is colliding. If I increase this to 36, let's see what happens. So it is very much spaced. This is how we can manipulate text behavior. And similarly, we can have alignment of text within the parent element. Let's say in this section, I want to have all the text aligned to the center, left, or start, or end. We can do. So let's use that behavior. For section elements, I'm going to align all text to center. All paragraph text, everything will center align. If you see here, the paragraph is now central. So usually the paragraph will align to the left. There is not from the left, go to the right. And this time, as the parent element text align property has been set to center, all the text within this Even the inline elements will align to the center. Similarly, if I do center, instead of center, if I do left, text align left, all items will align to the left. So there is something called align start. Something similar. There are other properties. Text align start. You can see all this center, end, justify, left, right, start. All this is all different options for text alignments. I'm going to use justify now. It will evenly space the elements to fit the entire width of the parent element. And there is one more thing that we can do, text manipulation. We can actually change the text transform. For text transform, we can use uppercase or lowercase or capitalize. So let's try uppercase. It will change all the text within that element as uppercase. Similarly, lowercase, all elements, all text will be changed to lowercase, no matter which case they have used in the text itself. And similarly, capitalize will capitalize each letter of the first, each of the words, first letter it will capitalize. So these are different text transformation properties. So I'll just come like this. That's about text manipulation. And there is something called positioning elements. So these elements can be specifically positioned on the page, left, right, or which x direction, x coordinate, y coordinates we can specify. That's a bit advanced. We'll visit that in the next class. And there is something called flexbox. We can see here, flexbox. This is very useful, flexbox and grid. These are mostly used in the modern web development. These are very powerful. And instead of using floats, we should always be using flexbox or grid for laying out elements. So we'll visit this also in this class. And the selectors, we already have seen different types of selectors. Just by revisiting, we can select an element by element ID with a hash symbol in before. And this is a way of selecting children of a parent element. These are different ways of selecting specific selected items. So if I use the selectors, we will go into advanced selectors in a later lesson. If I choose like this instead of space, if I use greater than symbol, that actually means the image tag should be an immediate child of this container. It should not be a descendant of this container. It should just be the immediate child of the container. Let's say in this, let's say another division is there. I put this in another division. So this parent child, this descendant selector will select this image. But whereas this selector does not select this image tag because it's not an immediate child of this container. It's a child of another child. This is a grandchild of this, but not an immediate child of this. So these are two different ways to select elements. There are pseudo selectors and more advanced selectors, which we will discuss later. I think for now, so this knowing this immediate select descendant versus uh, descendant is good enough. Let's comment out this. So we'll go into CSS selectors in a later lesson. And just to demonstrate, let's have one element here. Let's put it back. Here I'm going to have one section as container. We'll have a paragraph. Inside this, I'm going to have a link. And I'll have another link here as a direct child of this container. A is not a direct child of container. This A is going to be a direct child of this container. Outside. What's this spelling? Yes. Okay. Okay. Now we have one A element which is not a direct child, and one A element which is a direct child, and we will have another element here which doesn't have any relationship with the parent. It's a element on its own. Link outside of section. So let's see how these selectors work in this context. We go to layer. So we have the container and then a link inside that, and this is outside the. This is a direct chain, and this is not a direct chain. This link, and this is outside of section. Outside of section. Okay. Now let's select each of these specific items. Just a selection. If I select A, which is A element, color as black. This gets applied to all the anchor elements. This element, this element, this element, all three got selected. If I just use section and then A, this will select all the descendant elements of section, descendant A elements of section, anchor elements of section. Color, I'm going to use green. So all the descendants of this section as used, whether it is a direct child or this is a direct child, whether it is a direct child or a descendant inside parent. So all descendants got selected. It need not be immediate child of section. Now, if I do section and then A, this actually means from right to left we should count. So A anchor elements which are inside paragraph elements, which are actually inside section element. So all three conditions should meet. All anchor elements which are in paragraph elements, those paragraph elements should actually be in section elements. Only those anchor elements get selected. Color, I'm going to use pink. That's only this element satisfies all those three conditions. This is inside a paragraph. This paragraph is inside this section. And this does not satisfy that condition. If I have to select only this, I can use something like section or container. I'm going to use within container, which is the class here. Immediate child should be selected. Immediate child, this one. Immediate child, if it is A, I can actually give the gap here. We should actually give the gap. So we should use color orange. Only the immediate children will get selected here. Only this thing satisfies that criteria. So that's the difference between a descendant and immediate child. That's about CSS selectors in overall view, but it's not in depth. There are pseudo selectors and more advanced selectors, but this thing will give us our basic understanding, and we can proceed with our next steps. And what's next? I've discussed content box and border types. Let's discuss that one more time so that it's clear. I'll have a division class box 1. So box 2. We compare these two. One we will change it to border box, and one we will change it to content box, and we can see the difference within the browser actually. We have this box 1, box 2. Let's change the size and width of this. Box 1, I'm going to change the box, the divisions. I'm going to have backgrounds. Divisions. So, okay, there is one more thing I want to discuss here. So, if I want to select all divisions which have class as box, let's see, I have box. I'll have box here also. Whether it is box 1 or box 2, you can have multiple classes, subdivisions. This is actually a box, and box 1, box, and box 2. If I want to select an element which has all the classes or more than one condition, all the division elements which have a class of box. Even though a section has a class of box, I don't want to select that. So that I will demonstrate here. So if I have division and I want to have this division to have the box class, I can select it like this. So this does not select the section element even though it has box class in it. If I just use dot box, it will select both these two divisions as well as the section element. Just to demonstrate, I'll just throw background color. So all these two divisions, let's say I'll just select red to show the text also. So this box, this is a section, this also got selected, and these two boxes also got selected. I don't want this section to be selected, so I can use division without any gap if I do. So this condition has to satisfy both conditions. It has to be a division element and it has to have the box class for it. So now it has selected these two boxes, these two divisions which have the box class. And now I'm going to use width and height for this. Width as 200 pixels, 4 boxes. Height as 200 pixels, or I'll use 100 pixels for now. Margin, I'll use 20 pixels. So now we have two boxes. Width is 200, height is 100. And this time, I'm going to choose for box 1, I'm going to use border box, content box, and this for box 2, I'm going to use border box. Now I can actually select box 1 because like this, because only one element is there with that class. The box sizing, I'll use content box. This is the default box sizing model for any block elements. The browser default is content box. So even if we don't change this, that will stay as content box. So I'm explicitly specifying that just to demonstrate. And for box 2, box sizing as border box. But initially you won't see any difference. These two have both same sizes. We go to computers. So width is 200, height is 100, 20, 20, 20. Margin, this is the same thing for this 200, 100, 20, 20. So these two boxes are all same size now. There is no difference because we haven't added any border to it or padding to it. The only problem comes when we add border and padding to it. Let's go. So now box 1 is content box and this is border box. Now let's add padding to these boxes. Padding 20 pixels. If you see overall, the size of this thing got changed. Let's inspect. And this, if you see here, 200, 100, the size of the content did not change for content box. Padding got added extra. So that means 100 plus 20, 220 is the width of this. If you see highlight here, if you see the highlighted elements here, the padding has been highlighted here. So this is the border. It's up to here and padding got added extra. If you select this is the actual width of the element. If you go to this box, so padding got reduced from the total width of the element. So if you see this has 200. Earlier it was 200 for this also. As we have added padding, so the left side 20, right side 20 pixels, it got reduced from the width of the element, content of the element. So now the new width has become 160 and padding got added extra. That's one difference of content box and border box. So if we want to have our layout fixed and the width and height of the element should not change, whatever the border we add or padding we add, the size of it should not change, means we should always use border box rather than content box. If you use content box, if we change the alignment, padding, border, all these properties, the alignment of these layout will get disturbed. So it's better to use border box when we are laying out items in a well laid out fashion. And let's add border also now. Padding is affecting the width and border, I'm going to add 10 pixels solid black. Now, if we see this, width of it did not change. The overall size of the element got changed from 200 plus 20, 20, 40, 240 plus 10, 10, 20, 260. So overall width has become 260 pixels. Whereas for this, it has further reduced the size of the content, adding the border also as part of the content width itself. 140 plus 40, 180 plus 20, 200. Overall size of it, border box means including the border, this is the overall size of the element. Content box means excluding the border and padding, this is the size of the element. So that's the difference between border box and content box. And we need to look into flexbox and grid that we will see tomorrow. And for today, that's all for today.